From a $5 seed of humiliation bloomed a garden of abundance she never saw coming. Maya stared at the check through tears of rage. $5 from a family who'd called her husband's love a phase, when the knock at her door changed everything she thought she knew about being wanted. Welcome to our community of love and hope. If this is your first time here, please introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from so we can send prayers and positive energy your way. We're all family here, supporting each other through life's unexpected turns. This story touched your heart. I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our emotional storytelling sessions. We share new stories of love, hope, and second chances every week. Like this video if Maya and James's love story made you believe in fairy tales again. Comment below and tell me. Where are you watching from? I love connecting with our global family. Which part of Maya's journey hit you the hardest? Do you believe in love that transcends even death? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they deserve extraordinary love and beautiful things. Your support means everything to our storytelling community. Every subscription, like, and comment helps us reach more hearts with stories that remind us love always wins in the end. Now let me tell you this heartwarming story. Please stay with me. The apartment walls seemed to press closer each day, as if the weight of grief had somehow made the space physically smaller. Maya Johnson sat at her kitchen table, a wobbly thing rescued from a garage sale 3 years ago, staring at the envelope that had arrived that morning. The return address bore the elegant script of Whitmore, Blackstone and Associates, the law firm that had handled her late husband David's family affairs. Her twins, Amira and Aiden, 6 years old and bursting with the kind of energy that comes from being cooped up in small spaces, chased each other around the living room. Their laughter felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, but today even their joy couldn't penetrate the heaviness that had settled in her chest. "Mama, can we have snacks?" Amira called out, her dark curls bouncing as she hopped over a pile of clean laundry Maya hadn't had the energy to fold. "In a minute, baby," Maya replied, her voice catching slightly. She turned the envelope over in her hands, noting how thick and expensive the paper felt. David's family had money, the kind of old Charleston money that came with generations of judgment and carefully maintained distance from people like her. She remembered the funeral 6 months ago. How David's mother had looked right through her during the service, as if Maya and the children were invisible. How his brother had made a point of mentioning that David had been going through a phase when he'd married her, as if their 5 years together, their babies, their life had been nothing more than a temporary lapse in judgment. The envelope felt heavier than it should. Maya tore it open with shaking fingers, expecting legal documents about David's modest life insurance policy or maybe some final medical bills she'd have to figure out how to pay. Instead, she found a single check made out to Maya Johnson. $5. She blinked, certain she'd misread. But there it was, written in both numbers and words with lawyerly precision. 5 and 00/$100. The accompanying letter was brief. "Mrs. Johnson, as per the final wishes of the Whitmore family estate, please find enclosed your inheritance. This concludes any and all financial obligations between the Whitmore family and yourself or your children. Sincerely, Whitmore, Blackstone and Associates." Maya's hands began to tremble, not from sadness but from a rage so pure it felt like lightning in her veins. $5. After 5 years of marriage to their son. After giving them 2 grandchildren they'd never bothered to meet. After loving David with everything she had until cancer took him away. $5. She wanted to tear the check into pieces, but the practical part of her mind, the part that had learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed, whispered that $5 could buy milk for the twins. Or bread. Or maybe both if she was careful. The humiliation burned worse than the financial insult. They were telling her, in the coldest way possible, exactly what they thought she was worth. "Mama, why are you crying?" Aiden had appeared at her elbow, his small hand warm on her arm. At 6, he had David's gentle eyes and way of tilting his head when he was concerned. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she whispered, quickly wiping her cheeks. "Just some grown-up stuff." But she wasn't okay. The check felt like a slap across the face, a final rejection from people who had never even tried to know her. David had always said his family would come around, that they just needed time to see how happy she made him. He'd been so sure that love would win in the end. He'd been wrong. Maya looked around their tiny apartment, the second-hand furniture, the toys scattered across the carpet, the stack of bills on the counter that seemed to multiply when she wasn't looking. David's death had left them with just enough to scrape by, but barely. She worked 2 part-time jobs, cleaned houses in the morning and answered phones for a telemarketing company at night, while Mrs. Rodriguez from next door watched the twins. Every day was a careful calculation of survival. And now this. $5 and a dismissal that felt like they were erasing David's love for her, erasing the life they'd built together. 45 miles away, in a downtown Charleston office that smelled of mahogany and old money, James Mitchell was having his own crisis of conscience. The file on his desk had been there for 3 days, and he'd been avoiding it with the kind of professional procrastination that usually meant trouble. James had been handling estate law for 12 years, ever since he graduated from law school with enough debt to buy a small house and enough determination to pay it off as quickly as possible. He was good at his job because he understood that grief made people unpredictable. He'd learned to be gentle but firm, compassionate but professional. He never got too involved, never let the stories get under his skin. This case was different. The instructions were bizarre, almost mystical in their specificity. A deceased man named David Whitmore had left detailed provisions for an inheritance that his own family wasn't supposed to know about. The paperwork had been filed separately, sealed, and marked for James's eyes only. According to the documents, David had spent the last 2 years of his life secretly purchasing and preparing a property. Not just any property, a 127-acre estate in the mountains outside Asheville, complete with a restored 1920s manor house, guest cottages, and enough financial backing to maintain it for decades. All of it was to go to Maya Johnson, David's widow, and their children. But there were conditions. Strange ones. First, Maya had to receive a deliberately insulting inheritance from David's family, something David had apparently arranged through carefully worded instructions to his family's lawyers, though they didn't know the full plan. Second, James had to personally deliver the news about the real inheritance within 24 hours of her receiving the false one. Third, and this was the part that made James's professional skin crawl, he had to stay with her through the entire process of discovering what David had left behind. Not just deliver papers and leave, but actually guide her through it. The file included psychological profiles, grief counseling reports, and what appeared to be a years-long study of Maya's personality and needs. David had been thorough to the point of obsession, planning every detail of his wife's life after his death. It was either the most romantic thing James had ever seen, or the most controlling. James poured himself a coffee from the machine in his office corner and tried to focus on the simpler cases on his desk. A routine will reading. A property dispute between siblings. Normal things that didn't require him to play messenger for a dead man's elaborate love letter. But every time he looked away from the Maya Johnson file, something pulled him back. Maybe it was the photographs David had included. Maya laughing at a barbecue, Maya reading to the twins, Maya sleeping peacefully in what must have been better times. The love in David's written instructions was palpable, desperate, as if he was trying to care for his wife from beyond the grave. Or maybe it was James's own story that made him reluctant to get involved. 2 years ago, he'd lost someone too. Rebecca had been his fiancée, his future, his reason for working so hard to build a life worth sharing. The drunk driver who killed her had also killed something in James, the part that believed in love lasting, in building something beautiful with another person. Since then, he'd thrown himself into work with a kind of intensity that his friends called unhealthy and his therapist called avoidance. He was good at helping other people navigate loss because he understood it from the inside. But he'd never had to help someone discover that they were loved more than they knew. James checked his watch. It was almost 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, which meant Maya Johnson had probably received her insulting inheritance this morning. According to David's timeline, James needed to be at her door by tomorrow. He closed the file and reached for his coat. Some responsibilities couldn't be avoided, no matter how much they might cost your carefully protected heart. The drive to Maya's apartment complex took 20 minutes through Charleston traffic. James had looked up her address on Google Street View, so he knew what to expect. A modest complex that had seen better days, the kind of place where young families started out and single mothers made do. He sat in his car for a moment, looking up at the building and wondering what he was about to walk into. David's instructions had been clear about Maya's likely emotional state: devastated, angry, probably suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. James understood that. After Rebecca died, well-meaning friends had tried to convince him that good things could still happen, that love could find him again. He'd learned to smile and nod and change the subject. Some losses cut too deep for hope. But David Whitmore had believed otherwise. In his final letters to James, he'd written, "She thinks she's not worth loving because my family never saw what I saw. Show her the truth. Show her what love looks like when it's not afraid to be extravagant." James locked his car and headed toward the building, carrying a briefcase that contained the keys to a new life for a woman who probably wouldn't believe a word he said. The hallway smelled like coffee and children, and the kind of tired hope that came from people making the best of difficult circumstances. James found apartment 2B and knocked gently, the way he'd learned to knock when delivering news that would change everything. What do you think Maya's first reaction will be when she opens the door? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your predictions about where this story is heading. The knock was soft, almost apologetic, but it still made Maya's heart jump. She wasn't expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors usually meant bad news: a landlord, a bill collector, or maybe Mrs. Rodriguez with some emergency about the twins. Maya quickly folded the insulting check and shoved it into her pocket, then wiped her face one more time. "Kids, go wash your hands for snacks," she called out, buying herself a moment to compose herself. She opened the door to find a tall man in an expensive-looking charcoal suit, holding a leather briefcase. He was maybe 35, with kind eyes that seemed to take in everything. Her red-rimmed eyes, the chaos of toys behind her, the weariness she wore like an old coat. "Mrs. Johnson?" "Maya Johnson. His voice was gentle, professionally warm, but with something else underneath it. Concern, maybe. Yes. Maya's hand tightened on the doorframe. Her first instinct was to close the door. Men in expensive suits bringing briefcases to her apartment could only mean trouble she couldn't afford. My name is James Mitchell. I'm an attorney with Morrison & Associates. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, offering it with both hands like it was something precious. I need to speak with you about your late husband, David Whitmore. The name hit Maya like cold water. She'd been Maya Johnson again for 6 months now, ever since the funeral when David's family had made it clear that she'd never really been a Whitmore anyway. Hearing David's name in this stranger's mouth felt like reopening a wound that had barely begun to heal. I already got my inheritance, Maya said bitterly, patting her pocket where the $5 check rested. If you're here about more legal papers, I can't afford. Mrs. Johnson, James interrupted softly. May I come in? What I need to tell you, it's not what you think. And it's not something we should discuss in the hallway. There was something in his tone that made Maya pause. Not pity. She'd heard enough pity to recognize it instantly. This was different. Urgent, almost. Maya glanced back at her children, who were now clean and staring curiously at the strange man in their doorway. Every instinct told her to be cautious. But David's name hung in the air between them, and she found herself stepping aside. 5 minutes, she said. Whatever this is about, I can give you 5 minutes. James entered the small living space, and Maya watched him take it in without judgment. The second-hand furniture arranged to maximize space, the children's artwork taped to the walls, the neat stacks of books that were David's legacy to his kids. He didn't look around like he was calculating her worth. He looked around like he was trying to understand. Mama, who's the man? Amira whispered, pressing close to Maya's side. This is Mr. Mitchell, Maya said, her voice automatically shifting to the calm tone she used when the twins were nervous. He needs to talk to Mama about Daddy for a few minutes. Can you and Aiden play quietly in your room? Is it bad news? Aiden asked, because at 6 years old, he'd already learned that men in suits usually brought the kind of news that made his mama cry. James knelt down so he was at eye level with both children. Actually, he said seriously, I think it might be the opposite of bad news. But I need to talk to your mama first to make sure, okay? The twins exchanged one of those wordless conversations that only siblings share, then nodded and headed toward their bedroom. Maya waited until she heard the sound of toys being dumped on the floor before she turned back to James. You said this was about David. Maya stayed standing, arms crossed. David's been gone for 6 months. His family's lawyers already made it very clear what they think I'm worth. She pulled out the check, unfolded it, and held it up. $5. That's the sum total of my value to the Whitmore family. James looked at the check, and something flickered across his face. Not surprise, he'd been expecting this. But something else. Anger, maybe, or pain. Mrs. Johnson, he said carefully, that check is exactly why I'm here. David left very specific instructions about what would happen after you received it. Maya felt the world tilt slightly. What are you talking about? David's been dead for 6 months. What instructions? James set his briefcase on her coffee table and opened it. Inside, Maya could see thick legal documents, photographs, and what looked like handwritten letters. Her heart began to race. Your husband spent the last 2 years of his life creating a parallel inheritance, James said, his voice gentle but steady. Something his family doesn't know about. Something he wanted you to receive only after you understood how little they valued what he treasured most. Maya sank onto the couch, suddenly dizzy. I don't understand. The $5 inheritance wasn't an insult from David's family, James continued. Well, it was an insult, but David arranged for it to happen. He knew exactly how they felt about you, and he knew that receiving something that cruel would help you understand the difference between their love and his love. Maya stared at him, trying to process words that didn't make sense. David wouldn't. He always said his family would come around. He believed they'd learn to love me. He did believe that for a long time. James pulled out a photograph and handed it to her. It showed David in what looked like a hospital bed, writing in a notebook. This was taken about 8 months before he died. He'd just gotten the news that the cancer was terminal, and he decided not to tell you yet. Maya's breath caught. The photo showed David's face thin from chemotherapy, but his expression was focused, determined. She'd never seen this picture before. He spent those last months creating something for you, James said. Not just a financial inheritance, but, well, I think it's better if I show you than try to explain it. Show me what? Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. James stood up and extended his hand to her. Mrs. Johnson, your husband left you an estate. Not just money, an actual estate. 127 acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains, with a manor house that he spent 2 years restoring specifically for you and the children. Maya looked at his outstretched hand like it might bite her. That's impossible. David didn't have that kind of money. We lived in a tiny apartment. We shopped at thrift stores. He sold everything, James said quietly. His share of his family's investments, his trust fund, even some things his family doesn't know are missing yet. He liquidated his entire inheritance from his grandparents and put it into creating something that would be yours forever. Something his family could never take away from you. Maya felt tears starting again, but these were different from the angry tears she'd cried over the $5 check. These felt dangerous, like hope that might shatter her if she let it in. I need you to come with me, James said. Right now. Today. The estate is about 4 hours from here, and David's instructions were very specific about the timing. I can't just leave, Maya protested. I have work tomorrow. The twins have school. I can't just. Mrs. Johnson, James interrupted gently, what if I told you that you might never have to worry about work or bills or any of that again? What if David found a way to take care of you and the children for the rest of your lives? Maya stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception, for the catch that always came with promises that sounded too good to be true. But James's eyes were steady, kind, and absolutely serious. Why should I believe you? She whispered. James reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope with Maya's name written on it in David's familiar handwriting. Because he knew you'd ask that question. And he knew exactly what to say to convince you. Maya's hands shook as she took the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines in David's careful script. My darling Maya, if you're reading this, you just received $5 from my family, and you're wondering if the man with this letter is telling the truth. Remember our first date, when you said you didn't believe in fairy tales? I told you that the best fairy tales aren't about magic. They're about love that's so big it changes everything around it. I'm about to prove it. Trust him. Trust me. Trust what we built together. This is my fairy tale for you. All my love, always, David. Maya's sob caught in her throat. The letter was so perfectly David. His voice, his way of seeing the world, his absolute faith that love could move mountains. Mama. Amira appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of her mother's tears. Are you okay? Maya looked at her daughter, then at Aiden peeking around the corner, then at James who was waiting patiently for her decision. In David's letter, she could hear his voice as clearly as if he were standing in the room. Trust what we built together. Maya wiped her eyes and stood up. Mr. Mitchell, if this is real, if David really did what you're saying, I need to know. But I won't leave my children. I wouldn't expect you to, James said. In fact, David specifically planned for them to be part of this. Everything he did for the three of you. Maya walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot where she assumed James's car was waiting. For hours to drive somewhere that might change everything, or might be the cruelest hoax anyone had ever played on a grieving widow. But David's letter was real. His handwriting, his words, his way of seeing magic in the ordinary world. Kids, Maya called out, decision crystallizing in her chest like something solid and warm. Pack your overnight bags. We're going on an adventure. Right now? Aiden asked, eyes wide. Right now? Maya turned to James. Mr. Mitchell, I hope you're telling the truth. Because if you're not, if this is some kind of sick joke, you'll have to answer to 2 6-year-olds who are about to believe in magic again. James smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since he arrived. Mrs. Johnson, I promise you, this is no joke. Your husband loved you more than you know. And today, you're going to see exactly how much. As Maya helped the twins pack their small suitcases, her heart hammered with equal parts terror and hope. The $5 check crinkled in her pocket, but now it felt different. Not like an insult, but like the beginning of something she wasn't brave enough to name yet. Outside, James loaded their bags into a sleek sedan and waited while Maya locked the apartment door behind them. As they walked toward the car, Amira slipped her small hand into Maya's. Mama, is Daddy taking care of us from heaven? She whispered. Maya looked up at the sky, thinking of David's letter and the impossible promise it contained. I think maybe he is, baby. I think maybe he is. I'm so curious about your thoughts right now. Do you think Maya is making the right choice by trusting James? What do you imagine David's estate will look like? Share your predictions in the comments. I love seeing how this story is hitting different people. The drive started in silence, broken only by the twins' excited chatter from the back seat and the rhythmic hum of highway beneath the tires. Maya sat rigid in the passenger seat, David's letter clutched in her hands like a lifeline, watching the familiar Charleston suburbs give way to unfamiliar countryside. Every mile that passed made the situation feel more surreal. James had tried to make conversation. Gentle questions about the twins, careful observations about the changing landscape, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in someone else's life. Widowed mothers from run-down apartment complexes didn't get whisked away to mysterious mountain estates. That happened to other people, fictional people, people in the kind of stories David used to read to her when they were newlyweds and still believed the world was full of beautiful possibilities. Mama, are we really going to live in a castle? Aiden asked for the third time, his face pressed against the window. "We don't know what we're going to see, baby," Maya replied carefully. "Mr. Mitchell is taking us to look at something that might have belonged to Daddy. But we won't know what it is until we get there." She caught James glancing at her in the rearview mirror. There was something in his expression, patience mixed with concern, that made her more nervous, not less. "Mrs. Johnson," James said quietly, "I know this is overwhelming. David's instructions included a letter explaining why he set things up this way, if you'd like me to." "No." Maya's response came out sharper than she'd intended. "I'm sorry, I need to see whatever this is before I read any more letters. I need to understand what's real." What she didn't say was that Hope felt dangerous. The $5 check had hurt, but it had been a clean kind of pain, the final confirmation of what she'd always suspected about her place in David's world. This, whatever this was, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with someone promising there were wings waiting if she just had the courage to jump. Maya had been disappointed too many times to trust promises, even from David. James nodded and focused on the road ahead. But something in his silence felt heavy, like he was carrying secrets that weighed more than legal documents. 2 hours into the drive, they stopped for gas and snacks. Maya took the twins to the restroom while James filled the tank, and when they returned, she found him on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Understand the timeline, but she's not ready. This isn't just about documents and property. This is about a woman who's been grieving for 6 months and just learned that everything she thought she knew about her husband's final wishes was wrong." Maya herded the twins toward the car, but she couldn't help listening. "No, I won't rush her through this," James continued, his voice firmer now. David's instructions were clear about emotional considerations, not just legal ones. She needs time to process. He noticed Maya approaching and ended the call quickly, but not before she caught the tension in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Just checking in with my office," James said, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Making sure everything's arranged for when we arrive." Maya strapped the twins into their booster seats, but doubt was growing in her chest like a cold weight. James was hiding something. Maybe not something malicious, but something he didn't think she was ready to hear. "Mr. Mitchell," she said as they pulled back onto the highway, "I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there more to this story? Something you're not telling me?" James was quiet for a long moment, navigating around a slow-moving truck. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "There are aspects of David's arrangements that are complex. But I promise you, everything I've told you is true. Your husband did leave you an estate. He did spend 2 years preparing it for you. And he did love you more than his family ever understood." "That's not what I asked," Maya pressed. "I asked if there's more you're not telling me." In the rearview mirror, she watched James's knuckles tighten on the steering wheel. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "There's more. But David was very specific about how he wanted you to learn about it. In stages. At the right time." Maya felt that familiar anger rising, the same rage that had consumed her when she'd opened the $5 check. "So even from the grave, David's making decisions about what I can and can't handle? About what I'm ready to know?" "Maya," James started, then caught himself. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm sorry. I know this feels controlling. But if you could see the full scope of what he planned, you'd understand that every detail was designed to protect you and the children. Protect us from what? Maya's voice was getting louder, and she saw Amira and Aiden exchange worried glances in the back seat. James pulled off at the next exit, into the parking lot of a roadside diner. He turned off the engine and twisted around to face her directly. "Protect you from exactly what you're feeling right now," he said gently. "From the fear that it's too good to be true. From the suspicion that someone's trying to manipulate you. From the terror of hoping for something beautiful and having it taken away." Maya stared at him, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. "And how exactly does keeping secrets protect me from that?" "Because," James said, "if I told you everything right now, if I explained the full extent of what David did, how much money he spent, how many years he planned this, how many people he involved, you'd convince yourself it was impossible. You'd find a reason to believe it was all a mistake or a fraud. You'd run." The truth of that hit Maya like a physical blow. Because he was right. If someone had told her that morning that her late husband had secretly inherited millions and spent it all creating a fairy tale life for her and the children, she would have laughed them out of her apartment. "I still might run," she whispered. "I know," James said. "David knew that too. That's why he asked me to stay with you through this process. Not just to deliver papers, but to help you believe that you deserve what he wanted to give you." Maya looked back at her children, who were watching this conversation with the careful attention kids develop when they sense their world shifting. Amira had her thumb in her mouth, something she only did when she was scared. Aiden was holding his worn stuffed elephant, the one David had given him just before the cancer got bad. "What if I can't?" Maya asked. "What if I can't believe it, even when I see it?" James smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Then I guess we'll figure that out together. David chose me for this job because—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Because I understand what it's like to lose someone you thought you'd have forever. And he thought that might help me help you." Something in his tone made Maya study his face more carefully. She saw it then, the same carefully controlled grief she recognized in her own mirror every morning. James wasn't just David's lawyer. He was someone who understood loss from the inside. "Who did you lose?" she asked softly. James looked away, toward the mountains visible in the distance. "My fiancée. 2 years ago. Car accident." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding. Maya reached over and touched his arm briefly. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I," James replied. "For both of us." They sat there for a moment, two people bound together by grief and the strange circumstances of David's elaborate plan. In the back seat, the twins had grown quiet, sensing the shift in emotional weather. "Mr. Mitchell," Maya said finally, "James, if we're going to do this, if I'm going to trust you and trust whatever David set up, I need you to promise me something." "What's that?" "No more secrets after today. Whatever we find at this estate, whatever papers you have in that briefcase, whatever David wrote in his letters, I need to know all of it. Even the parts he thought might scare me." Maya's voice grew stronger. "I'm not as fragile as everyone seems to think. I've survived losing the love of my life and raising 2 children alone and working 2 jobs and living on $5 from people who hate me. I can handle whatever truth David left behind." James studied her face, and Maya could see him making some kind of decision. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "After today, no more secrets. But Maya, and I hope you don't mind me using your first name, when you see what David built for you, you're going to understand why he wanted to introduce you to it gradually. It's not just a house. It's not just money. It's, well, you'll see." Maya buckled her seatbelt again, feeling something settle in her chest. Not peace, exactly, but determination. "Then let's go see it." As James started the car and pulled back onto the highway, Maya noticed her hands had stopped shaking. The fear was still there, and the anger, and the desperate hope she was trying not to acknowledge. But underneath it all was something new: curiosity. For the first time since David died, Maya wanted to know what came next. The mountains grew larger as they drove, and the twins resumed their excited speculation about castles and fairy tales. Maya found herself looking out the window and trying to imagine what David had been thinking during those last months of his life. What had driven him to create this elaborate surprise? What had he seen in those final letters and medical appointments that made him believe she'd need more than just love to survive losing him? "Are we almost there?" Amira asked, echoing the question Maya didn't have the courage to voice. James checked the GPS. "About an hour," he said. "But Maya, before we arrive, there's one more thing I need to tell you." Maya tensed. "What?" "David's arrangements include ongoing support. This isn't just about giving you a house and walking away. He set up systems to make sure you and the children are taken care of for the rest of your lives." James's voice was careful, professional. "There are people involved, financial advisors, property managers, even educational trusts for Amira and Aiden." Maya felt her chest tighten again. How many people know about this? Just a handful. Everyone David trusted completely. Everyone who signed extensive confidentiality agreements. James glanced at her. "He was very protective of your privacy." Maya looked out at the passing landscape, rolling hills giving way to steeper mountain slopes, forests that seemed to go on forever. Somewhere ahead was a life David had imagined for her, complete with support systems and financial security, and all the things she'd stopped believing were possible. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like pressure, like wearing someone else's clothes that didn't quite fit. "James," she said quietly, "what if I don't want it? What if it's too much, or too complicated, or just not me?" James was quiet for several miles before he answered. "Then you'll figure out what you do want. But Maya, don't make that decision from a place of fear. Make it from a place of truth." Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure she knew the difference anymore. Fear and truth had gotten so tangled up since David died that sometimes she couldn't tell which voice in her head belonged to grief and which belonged to wisdom. But in an hour, she'd start finding out. What do you think Maya will find at the estate? Are you team embrace the gift, or team this feels too controlling? I'm fascinated by how differently people react to unexpected inheritances. Drop your thoughts below. The GPS announced their arrival just as the late afternoon sun began casting long shadows through the trees. Maya had been expecting a driveway, maybe a mailbox with a number. Instead, James turned onto what looked like a private road marked only by 2 stone pillars and an ornate iron gate that stood open as if it had been waiting for them. "This can't be right," Maya murmured, but her heart was already beating faster. The road wound through dense forest for nearly a mile before opening into a clearing that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. Ahead of them stood a three-story manor house that looked like it belonged in a magazine about European estates, not hidden in the North Carolina mountains. The house was built of honey-colored stone with tall windows that caught the golden afternoon light. Wraparound porches with elegant columns stretched across the front and around both sides. Gardens that showed recent care surrounded the foundation, and Maya could see what looked like a carriage house and several smaller buildings scattered across the property. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mama, is that really ours?" Amira pressed her face against the window, her voice filled with awe. James parked in the circular driveway and turned off the engine. The silence that followed felt sacred, as if they'd entered a place where normal rules didn't apply. "This is Whitmore Estate," James said quietly. "Though David renamed it in the legal documents. It's officially called Maya's Haven now." Maya stared at the house, her house apparently, and felt reality tilting again. How is this possible? David was a teacher. We lived on his teacher's salary and my part-time jobs. We shopped at thrift stores. David's grandfather left him a substantial trust fund when he turned 30, James explained. David never touched it because he wanted to build a life with you based on what you two earned together. But when he got sick, he liquidated everything and put it into this. Maya climbed out of the car on unsteady legs. The twins tumbled out behind her, immediately running toward the wide front steps with a fearless excitement that only children could manage. "Careful!" Maya called after them, but her voice sounded strange in the mountain air, smaller somehow. James retrieved his briefcase and joined her in front of the house. Up close, Maya could see the careful attention to detail, hand-carved railings, stained glass panels flanking the front door, window boxes that someone had recently planted with late-season flowers. "Who's been taking care of it?" she asked. David arranged for a local property management company. They've been maintaining everything according to his specifications for the past year. James pulled out an ornate set of keys. "But Maya, before we go inside, I need to tell you something else." Maya felt her stomach drop. "More secrets." "Not secrets. Logistics." James looked uncomfortable. "The property management company is expecting us, but they're not available until tomorrow morning to go through all the systems, security, utilities, maintenance schedules. And there's a weather system moving in tonight. The roads back down the mountain can get dangerous in heavy rain." Maya looked up at the sky, noticing for the first time the thick clouds gathering on the horizon. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we might need to stay here tonight. The house is fully furnished and stocked. David made sure of that. But I know this is a lot to process, and being stuck here overnight might feel overwhelming." Maya turned to watch her children, who had discovered a swing hanging from a massive oak tree near the house. Aiden was pushing Amira, both of them laughing with pure joy. For the first time in months, they looked like the carefree kids they'd been before grief settled over their family like a heavy blanket. "They seem pretty comfortable with it," Maya observed. "What about you?" James asked gently. Maya considered this. The practical part of her mind, the part that had learned to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true, was screaming warnings. Staying overnight would make this all feel more real, more permanent. It would be harder to walk away if she decided this was too much to accept. But another part of her, a part she'd almost forgotten existed, was curious about what David had created here. What had he seen in his final months that made him believe she needed a place like this? "Are you staying too?" she asked James. "If you're comfortable with that." David's instructions were for me to help you through the initial transition. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing you and the kids aren't here alone on your first night. Maya studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. But James looked as uncertain about this arrangement as she felt. There was something vulnerable in his expression that reminded her he was dealing with his own complicated relationship to David's elaborate plan. "Separate rooms," she said finally. "Of course. The house has 6 bedrooms. And you promise we can leave tomorrow if I decide this isn't right for us?" "I promise." "Though, Maya." James hesitated. "I think you should at least see what David left for you inside before you make any final decisions." Maya nodded and called to the twins. "Amira, Aiden, come on. We're going to explore the house." They raced back, breathless and pink-cheeked from the cool mountain air. "Mama, there's a pond behind those trees," Aiden announced. "And I think I saw a treehouse. Can we live here forever and ever?" Amira asked, taking Maya's hand. "We're just visiting for now, baby," Maya said carefully. "But we'll see." James unlocked the front door, and Maya felt like Alice stepping through the looking glass. The entryway was stunning: polished hardwood floors, a chandelier that cast warm light across cream-colored walls, and a staircase that curved gracefully to the second floor. But what took Maya's breath away wasn't the elegance. It was the personal touches. On a side table near the door sat a framed photo of Maya and David from their wedding day, her in a simple white dress they bought on sale, him in his best suit, both of them laughing at something outside the camera's view. Next to it was a smaller photo of the twins as newborns, their tiny hands wrapped around David's fingers. "He put our pictures here," Maya whispered. "He put your pictures everywhere," James said softly. Maya walked deeper into the house, the twins beside her, all of them taking in the beautiful furniture, the carefully chosen artwork, the way every room seemed designed for both elegance and comfort. But it was the photographs that undid her, images of their life together displayed throughout the house like a love letter written in memories. The living room had a massive stone fireplace with built-in bookshelves on either side. Maya recognized many of the books, volumes from David's collection, children's books he'd loved reading to the twins, even some of her own romance novels that she'd been embarrassed about but he defended fiercely. "Look, Mama." Amira had found the kitchen, which was bigger than their entire apartment back in Charleston. "There's an island and everything." Maya followed her children, running her hands along granite countertops and taking in the professional-grade appliances. The refrigerator was already stocked, she noticed. Fresh fruit, milk for the twins, even the specific brand of yogurt that Aiden preferred. "How did they know what to buy?" she asked James. "David left very detailed instructions about your preferences. He studied you, Maya. 4 months." James opened the pantry to reveal shelves lined with familiar brands and favorite snacks. "He wanted you to feel at home immediately." Maya felt tears threatening again. Not sad tears this time, but something more complicated. David had been planning this secret life for her, while she'd been worried about grocery bills and whether they could afford new shoes for the kids. He'd been imagining her future, while she'd been focused on getting through each day. It was overwhelming and touching, and somehow heartbreaking all at once. "There's more," James said gently. Would you like to see the rest? The twins were already exploring, their voices echoing from what sounded like a family room. Maya followed the sound and found them in a cozy space with overstuffed couches, a big-screen TV, and shelves full of games and toys that looked suspiciously like updated versions of their favorites from home. David thought of everything, Maya said, more to herself than to James. He had help. There's a woman named Ellen Carmichael who works with the property management company. She has kids of her own, and David consulted with her extensively about what Amira and Aiden might need. Maya picked up a puzzle box from one of the shelves. It was a picture of dolphins, Amira's current obsession. Brand new, but exactly what her daughter would choose. This is either the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done, Maya said slowly, or the most controlling. Maybe it's both, James said. Does that make it wrong? Maya considered this as thunder rumbled in the distance. Through the large windows, she could see the first drops of rain beginning to fall. I guess we're about to find out, she said. James showed them to the bedrooms upstairs. The twins would share a room that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood children. Comfortable beds, a reading nook, toys and books arranged to encourage exploration rather than decoration. Maya's room was at the end of the hall, and when James opened the door, she gasped. It was beautiful but not overwhelming. Soft colors, comfortable furniture, windows that looked out over the gardens and mountains beyond. On the bedside table was another framed photo, this one of her and David taken just a few months before he got sick. They were reading together on their old couch, her head on his shoulder, both of them peaceful and happy. He really did love me, Maya whispered, touching the photo's frame. More than you know, James said. There's a letter for you on the desk. From David. He wanted you to read it after you'd seen the house. Maya looked at the envelope with her name written in David's careful handwriting, but she wasn't ready yet. Instead, she walked to the window and watched the rain begin in earnest, turning the mountain landscape silver and mysterious. Where will you sleep? She asked James. There's a guest room down the hall. I won't disturb you or the children. But Maya, if you need anything tonight, if this becomes too much or you want to talk through any of it, just knock on my door. Maya nodded, still looking out at the storm. James, can I ask you something? Of course. When you lost your fiancée, did people try to tell you that she would have wanted you to be happy? That she would have wanted you to move on and find love again? James was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. And it made me furious every time. Because you couldn't believe it? Because I knew it was true, and I wasn't ready for it to be true. James joined her at the window. David believed you deserve happiness, Maya. Not just financial security, but real joy. The kind of life where you don't have to count every dollar or work yourself to exhaustion just to survive. Maya watched lightning flash in the distance. What if I'm not ready for it to be true either? Then you take as much time as you need. But you don't have to figure it all out tonight. Downstairs, Maya could hear the twins exploring, their excited voices mixing with the sound of rain on the roof. For the first time in months, they sounded like children instead of kids trying to be brave for their grieving mother. I should go check on them, Maya said. And I should call the property management company, let them know we're staying tonight. James headed toward the door, then paused. Maya, for what it's worth, I think David knew exactly what he was doing. This place, it feels like love made tangible. After James left, Maya sat on the edge of the bed and picked up David's letter. But instead of opening it immediately, she listened to the sounds of the house, rain on windows, children's laughter, the settling creaks of a home that was somehow both foreign and familiar. Outside, the storm was gathering strength, trapping them all in this beautiful, impossible place David had created. Maya wasn't sure if that felt like sanctuary or prison. But for tonight, with her children safe and happy in rooms designed just for them, she thought she might be willing to find out. I'm dying to know what you think David wrote in that letter. And what about James? Are you sensing some chemistry there, or is it too soon? Share your thoughts below. This story is giving me all the feels, and I need to know it's hitting you the same way. The storm raged through the night, and Maya woke to the sound of rain still pattering against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder moving through the mountains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too comfortable, the room too quiet, the ceiling too high. Then reality crashed back. David's secret estate, James sleeping down the hall, her children in a fairy tale bedroom that their father had designed from beyond the grave. Maya's hand found David's letter on the nightstand where she'd left it unopened the night before. She'd been too overwhelmed, too afraid of what emotions it might unleash. But now, in the gray morning light filtering through rain-streaked windows, she felt ready to hear her husband's voice again. She padded to the window seat and curled up with the envelope, listening to the sounds of the house waking up, water running in the pipes, footsteps in the hallway, James's quiet voice speaking to someone on the phone downstairs. With trembling fingers, Maya opened the letter. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, you've seen what I built for you, and you're probably overwhelmed and maybe a little angry. You're probably wondering how I could make such enormous decisions without consulting you, and you have every right to feel that way. Let me tell you a story. 3 years ago, when the doctor first mentioned the word cancer in a routine appointment, my first thought wasn't about dying. It was about you and the twins living in that tiny apartment forever, working yourselves to exhaustion, never having the security or peace I'd always planned to give you someday. I went home that night and watched you help Amira with her homework while stirring dinner with one hand and folding laundry with the other. You were beautiful and tired and completely unaware that you were performing miracles just by loving our family so completely. That's when I knew I had to do something big. Not just life insurance or savings, something that would change the fundamental circumstances of your life. Something that would give you choices instead of just survival. Maya, I need you to understand something about my family's money. I never told you how much there was because I wanted us to build our life together on what we could earn and create ourselves. But my grandfather left me enough to ensure that our children's children would never want for anything. I kept it in investments I never touched, money that felt like it belonged to someone else. When I got sick, I realized that money belonged to you. It belonged to our family's future. So I started planning. The hardest part wasn't finding the right property or hiring the right people or managing the logistics. The hardest part was keeping it secret from you while you took care of me through the worst months of my life. There were so many times I wanted to tell you, especially near the end when you looked so exhausted and scared. But I also knew you. I knew you'd try to talk me out of it. You'd say it was too much, that you didn't need anything fancy, that love was enough. And you'd be right about love being enough. It was always more than enough for me. But I wanted to give you more than enough. I wanted to give you abundance. Maya, attached to this letter, you'll find a journal I kept during those last months. I want you to read it, but maybe not all at once. It chronicles how this place came to be, But more than that, it chronicles how much I loved watching you love our children, how proud I was of your strength, how desperate I felt to make sure you'd be okay after I was gone. There's also a key to the safe in the study downstairs. Inside, you'll find documents that explain everything: finances, property details, the trust funds for the twins, and letters from all the people who helped me create this for you. But most importantly, you'll find a video I made for you 3 months before I died. I was feeling strong that day, and I wanted you to see me one more time the way I was when we fell in love, healthy and happy and absolutely certain that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared of accepting something this big. But Maya, you deserve a life where you can focus on being a mother instead of just surviving. You deserve to watch our children grow up in a place where they can run and explore and dream as big as they want. You deserve to breathe. I hope someday you'll understand that this estate isn't just a house. It's my promise that love doesn't end with death. It changes form, but it endures. All my love, always and forever, David. P.S. James Mitchell is a good man who understands loss. Trust him. And maybe, when you're ready, let him help you learn to hope again. Maya pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed, not the bitter tears of grief she'd grown accustomed to, but the deep, cleansing tears of being truly seen and loved. David had known her so completely that even facing his own death, he'd been thinking about her tendency to shoulder burdens alone, her habit of believing she didn't deserve beautiful things. A soft knock at her door interrupted her tears. "Mama." Amira's voice was uncertain. "Are you okay?" Maya wiped her face and opened the door to find both twins standing in the hallway, already dressed and looking concerned. "I'm okay, babies," she said, pulling them both into a hug. "Just missing Daddy." "Is he really the one who made this house for us?" Aiden asked. "Yes, sweetheart. He wanted to make sure we'd always have a beautiful place to live." "Can we explore more today?" Amira asked hopefully. Maya looked down the hallway toward the stairs, where she could smell coffee brewing and hear James moving around in the kitchen. "Let's go have breakfast, and then we'll explore everything." Downstairs, James had set the kitchen table for 4 and was scrambling eggs while bacon sizzled in another pan. He looked up when they entered, his eyes immediately going to Maya's tear-stained face. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. "David left me a journal," Maya said, holding up the leather-bound book that had been tucked behind his letter. "And apparently there's a safe in the study?" James nodded. "With everything you'll need to understand the full scope of what he arranged. But Maya, you don't have to tackle all of that today. We can take it piece by piece." "Actually," Maya said, settling the twins at the table with orange juice, "I think I want to understand it all. Now. Before I lose my nerve." After breakfast, while the twins played in the family room, James led Maya to the study, a cozy room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large wooden desk. Behind a painting of the mountain landscape, James revealed a wall safe. "David gave me the combination for today," James said. "But after this, only you'll have access." Inside the safe, Maya found exactly what David had promised: financial documents that made her gasp at the scope of his planning, property deeds that showed he'd been working on this for over 2 years, and trust fund papers that would ensure Amira and Aiden could attend any college they chose without ever worrying about money. But what undid her completely was the tablet containing David's video message. "I'll give you privacy for this," James said, but Maya caught his arm. "Stay," she said. "Please." I don't think I can handle seeing him alone. James pulled up a chair beside her as Maya pressed play. David's face filled the screen, and Maya's breath caught. This was David as she'd fallen in love with him, healthy, laughing, his eyes bright with mischief and affection. He was sitting in what looked like the garden outside, spring flowers blooming around him. "Hello, my beautiful wife," Video David said, and Maya felt James's presence beside her like an anchor keeping her grounded. "If you're watching this, then James has successfully convinced you to stay at the estate overnight, and you've probably read my letter. First things first, yes, I planned for you to be a little bit trapped there during a storm. I knew you'd need time to really see the place before you could decide whether to accept it." Maya laughed despite her tears. He really did think of everything. On screen, David continued, "I want to tell you about the day I knew this was the right place. I was walking through the house with the real estate agent, and she mentioned that the previous owners had raised 4 children here. She said the house was built for love, for family, for the kind of life where children could grow up feeling safe and free. I stood in what's now your bedroom, looking out at the mountains, and I could see it so clearly, you reading by that window, the twins running through the gardens, all of us together in a place beautiful enough to match how beautiful you've made my life." Maya watched her husband's face, seeing the love and certainty there, the absolute conviction that this was right. "Maya, I know you're probably feeling guilty about accepting something this extravagant. You're probably thinking it's too much, that you don't deserve it. But darling, you've given me 5 years of such pure happiness that I want to spend eternity making sure you know how precious you are." David leaned closer to the camera. "And I need you to know that this isn't about control or trying to manage your life from beyond the grave. This is about giving you choices. If you want to work, work. If you want to travel, travel. If you want to fill this house with foster children who need love, do that. If you want to fall in love again someday, and I hope you do, know that this place will always be your foundation." Maya glanced at James, who was staring at the screen with an unreadable expression. "The only thing I ask," David continued, "is that you let yourself be happy. Let yourself believe that you deserve beautiful things. And remember that love this big doesn't die. It just changes form and keeps protecting the people it cherishes most." The video ended with David blowing a kiss to the camera, and Maya sat in silence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her husband had created for her. "He really loved you," James said quietly. "I'm starting to understand that," Maya whispered. "But James, this is so much more than I ever imagined. I don't know how to be the person who lives in a place like this." James turned to face her. "Maya, can I tell you something about loss? Something I learned the hard way." She nodded. "When Rebecca died, I spent 2 years trying to make myself smaller. Smaller apartment, smaller ambitions, smaller life. I thought that if I didn't want much, I couldn't lose much. But what I really did was dishonor everything she'd loved about me. I made her love smaller by making myself smaller." James gestured around the beautiful study. "David didn't create this place to overwhelm you. He created it to give you room to be as big as he knew you could be. To give his children space to grow into whoever they're meant to become." Maya walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where her twins were now playing despite the light rain, their laughter carrying through the glass. "What if I mess it up?" she asked. "What if I'm not strong enough or smart enough to manage all of this?" "Then you'll figure it out as you go," James said. "And you won't have to figure it out alone." David made sure of that too. Maya turned back to him. The letter mentioned that you understand loss. Is that why David chose you for this? James nodded. He interviewed several attorneys before settling on me. He said he needed someone who understood that grief makes it hard to believe in good things again. Someone who could be patient while you learn to trust that this was real. And are you? Patient, I mean. James smiled. Maya, I've spent 2 years believing that beautiful things were behind me. Helping you discover that they might still be ahead of you. It's helping me remember that maybe beautiful things are still possible for all of us. Outside, thunder rumbled again, but gentler this time, like a storm moving away instead of settling in. Maya picked up David's journal and ran her fingers over the worn leather cover. I think I'd like to read this, she said. All of it. I want to understand how his mind worked during those last months, what he was thinking and feeling while he planned all this. Do you want company while you read it? James asked. Maya considered this. The old Maya would have said no, would have insisted on processing everything alone. But something about this place, about David's final gift, was making her braver about accepting help. Yes, she said. I think I'd like that very much. They settled onto the comfortable couch in the study, Maya with David's journal and James with some of the legal documents. Outside, the storm continued its gentle retreat, and inside, Maya began reading the story of how love had built a sanctuary for the people it couldn't bear to leave behind. Okay, I'm literally crying right now. David's love story from beyond the grave is hitting me so hard. And can we talk about the chemistry building between Maya and James? What do you think about David's message encouraging Maya to fall in love again? Drop your thoughts below. I need to know this is affecting you like it's affecting me. The journal entries began 3 months before David's death, written in his careful teacher's handwriting that grew shakier as the weeks progressed. Maya read them aloud to James, her voice catching on the more intimate passages, both of them sitting in the warm study while rain continued to tap gently against the windows. March 15th met with the architect today about expanding the master bedroom closet. Maya doesn't think she needs much space for clothes, but I want her to have room to grow into the idea that she deserves beautiful things. Ordered those cashmere sweaters she always admires in store windows, but never buys for herself. The cancer is responding well to treatment, but I can see the fear in Maya's eyes every time I come home from chemo. She's trying so hard to be strong for the twins and for me. I want to tell her about the estate, but I know she'd spend her energy worrying about the logistics instead of focusing on my recovery. Sometimes I catch her looking at our bank statements with that expression she gets when she's calculating whether we can afford something special for the kids. After I'm gone, I never want her to look at money that way again. Maya paused in her reading, wiping her eyes. I had no idea he was watching me so closely. Love notices everything, James said softly. Even when we think we're hiding our worries. Maya continued reading, and the entries painted a picture of a man who spent his final months studying the people he loved, learning their needs and dreams and fears with the intensity of someone who knew his time was limited. April 2nd Maya fell asleep on the couch reading to the twins again. She was holding Where the Crawdads Sing, a book she's read 3 times but always claims she doesn't have time for leisure reading. Found her bookmark on page 200. She deserves a life where she can read entire novels without guilt. Ordered a complete library for the estate. Fiction, poetry, biographies of strong women, children's books the twins will grow into. Maya should have books the way other people have flowers, everywhere, abundant, beautiful. James Mitchell called today. He understands why this has to be done carefully. He lost someone too. I think that's exactly what Maya will need. Someone who knows that accepting joy after loss takes courage. Maya looked up at James. He planned for you to be part of this from the beginning. James nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. He was very specific about wanting someone who could relate to your situation. Someone who wouldn't push too hard or too fast. And someone who might understand me, Maya said quietly. Their eyes met for a moment, and Maya felt something flutter in her chest that she quickly pushed away. It was too soon, too complicated. She was sitting in a house her dead husband had built for her, reading his private thoughts about her future. This wasn't the time for whatever was happening between her and James. Maya returned to the journal, but the entries grew more personal, more heartbreaking. May 18th, bad day with chemo. Maya held my head while I was sick, and afterward, she cried in the bathroom thinking I couldn't hear. She whispers prayers every night, asking God to let me live long enough to see the twins graduate high school. I want to live that long too. But I also want to know that if I can't, she'll be more than okay. She'll be abundant. She'll have choices. She'll remember that she's worthy of extraordinary love. Finalized the education trusts today. Amira wants to be a veterinarian this week. Aiden is convinced he'll be an astronaut. Whatever they dream, they'll have the resources to pursue it. Maya will never have to choose between her children's dreams and her own survival. James reached over and squeezed Maya's hand gently. You don't have to read all of this today. Yes, I do, Maya said, though her voice was shaking. I need to understand how his mind worked. I need to see myself through his eyes. The journal entries from David's final month were the hardest to read, filled with his growing awareness that time was running out and his desperate need to complete his preparations. June 10th, lawyer says all the paperwork is finalized. Ellen Carmichael has the house perfectly set up, even found that specific brand of mac and cheese the twins love. Property management company knows exactly how to maintain everything. Trust fund managers are the best in the state. Maya is going to be shocked. She'll probably be angry at first. She hates surprises, especially big ones. But I hope once she sees it all, once she understands that this is love made tangible, she'll let herself accept it. Recorded the video message today. Wanted to look strong for her one more time. Wanted her to see me the way she did when we first met, full of hope and absolutely certain about our future together. If I could give her one thing, it would be the ability to see herself as I see her, brave, beautiful, deserving of every good thing this world has to offer. Maya closed the journal and sat in silence, overwhelmed by the depth of David's love and the scope of his planning. In the family room, she could hear the twins playing quietly, their voices a comforting background hum. He really thought of everything, she finally said. He thought of you, James corrected. Everything else was just details. Maya stood and walked to the window again, watching her children build a fort out of couch cushions in the room next door. I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is all a mistake. That there's been some kind of mix-up and I don't really deserve any of this. James joined her at the window. Maya, can I ask you something? Of course. When you married David, did you feel like you deserved his love? Maya considered this. At first, no. He was educated from a good family, had this steady job and this bright future. I was working at a diner and living with 3 roommates in a terrible apartment. But eventually you believed he loved you. Eventually. Maya smiled at the memory. He was very persistent about proving it. Flowers every Friday, handwritten notes in my textbooks when I went back to finish my degree, the way he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in any room. So you learned to accept his love. I did. James turned to face her fully. Maya, this estate, it's not different from flowers every Friday. It's just David being persistent about proving he loves you, even now. Maya felt tears threatening again, but they were different tears now. Not grief exactly, but something more complex. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. It's just so big, she whispered. Love is big, James said simply. The question is whether you're ready to live in a space big enough to hold it. Before Maya could respond, Amira came running into the study. Mama, we found a secret door. A what? Maya followed her daughter back to the family room, where Aiden was standing proudly next to what looked like a bookshelf that had swung open to reveal a hidden passage. Look. Aiden pointed into the opening. It goes to another room. James laughed. David mentioned this in his notes to me. It's a passage to what he called the Wonder Room. He said every house with children should have at least one secret. Maya peered into the passage, which was lit with soft LED lights and looked perfectly safe for children to explore. Of course he did. They followed the twins through the passage, which opened into a magical play space complete with climbing structures, art supplies, dress-up costumes, and walls covered with chalkboard paint for drawing. It's like a fairy tale. Amira breathed, spinning around to take it all in. Can we live here forever? Aiden asked, already heading for a basket full of Legos. Maya watched her children explore their father's final gift to them, and something shifted in her chest. For the first time since David died, her children looked completely, unself-consciously happy. Not trying to be brave for her, not tiptoeing around her grief, just purely joyful. He knew them so well, she said to James. Even knowing he wouldn't be here to see them grow up, he understood exactly what would make them feel safe and loved. He understood all of you, James said. Maya settled onto a cushioned bench built into one of the walls, watching Amira and Aiden begin an elaborate game involving dinosaurs and space travel. James sat beside her, and for a few minutes, they simply enjoyed the sound of children at play. James, Maya said quietly, can I ask you about your fiancée? About Rebecca. James was silent for a moment. What would you like to know? David's letter said I should let you help me learn to hope again. But how can you help me with something you're still struggling with yourself? James smiled sadly. Maybe that's exactly why I can help. Maya, Rebecca would have loved this place. She would have loved seeing children discover that secret passage. She would have understood exactly why David did all of this. Tell me about her. She was a pediatric nurse, James said, his voice growing warmer. She believed in magic, not the supernatural kind, but the magic of small kindnesses and beautiful spaces and love that shows up in practical ways. She always said that the best gift you could give someone was the freedom to be completely themselves. Maya looked around the Wonder Room, at the way David had created a space where children could be wild and creative and free. That's what this is, isn't it? David giving us the freedom to be ourselves without worrying about money or space or whether we deserve beautiful things. Exactly. James met her eyes. And Maya, I think Rebecca would say that learning to accept this gift, learning to believe you deserve it, might help me remember that I deserve beautiful things too. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared loss but also shared possibility. Maya felt her heart speed up, but this time she didn't push the feeling away. "Are you saying that helping me might help you too?" she asked. "I'm saying that maybe we're both learning the same lesson," James said softly. "That love doesn't end when someone dies. It changes form. And sometimes it creates space for new love to begin." Before Maya could respond, Amira came running over with a drawing she'd made on the chalkboard wall. "Look, Mama. I drew our family." Maya looked at the chalk drawing, stick figures of herself, Amira, and Aiden, with a larger figure that was clearly David watching over them from what looked like a cloud. But there was also a fourth figure standing next to Maya, and Amira had labeled it James. "Sweetheart," Maya said carefully, "why did you draw James in our family picture?" Amira shrugged with the casual wisdom of 6-year-olds. "Because he takes care of us now. Like Daddy did, but different." Maya looked at James, who was staring at the drawing with an expression of wonder and something that looked like longing. "Is that okay?" Amira asked, suddenly uncertain. "I can erase him if you want." "No, baby," Maya said quickly. "You don't need to erase anyone." As the afternoon wore on, Maya found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since David's death. The twins played while she and James talked, about books, about travel, about the small dreams people carry and sometimes get brave enough to pursue. James told her about his work, about cases where he'd helped families navigate loss and complicated inheritances. Maya shared stories about her children, about the funny things they said and the ways they reminded her of David. It felt natural, comfortable, like a friendship that was becoming something more without either of them having to name it yet. As evening approached and the rain finally stopped, James helped Maya put together dinner from the well-stocked kitchen while the twins played in the garden outside, their voices carrying through the open windows. "This feels like a real home," Maya said, watching James efficiently chop vegetables while she seasoned chicken. "Not just a house, but a place where life happens." "David designed it that way," James said. "But Maya, a house is only a home when it's filled with the right people." Maya looked at him, at the way he moved comfortably in David's kitchen, the way he smiled when the twins' laughter drifted in from outside, the way he seemed to understand that she needed both space and companionship as she processed everything David had left for her. "James," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay." "Are you here just because David asked you to be? Or is there another reason you're staying?" James stopped chopping and looked at her directly. "Maya, I came here because David asked me to help you through this transition. But I'm staying because somewhere between reading his letters about you and watching you discover what he built for your family, I started to care about what happens to you. Not as your lawyer, but as someone who's beginning to hope again himself." Maya felt her breath catch. "Is that okay? With you, I mean? Given everything?" "I think," James said carefully, "that it's exactly what David hoped would happen. Not necessarily with me specifically, but with someone who could see what he saw in you and love you for it." Before Maya could respond, the twins burst through the back door, muddy and exhilarated from their garden adventure. "Mama, there's a pond with fish," Aiden announced, "and a gazebo with a swing, and a garden where we can grow vegetables," Amira added. "James, do you know how to plant tomatoes?" James looked at Maya, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to answer as if he might be around to help with future garden projects. "I do know how to plant tomatoes," James said. "Maybe we can start a garden this spring." Maya's heart fluttered at the casual way he said "we," at the assumption that there might be a future where James was part of their daily lives. As they sat down to dinner together, Maya, James, and the twins around the kitchen table in David's dream house, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months: contentment. Not the desperate gratitude of someone who'd been handed charity, but the deep satisfaction of someone who was exactly where she belonged. Outside, the storm clouds were clearing, revealing the first stars over the mountains. And inside, for the first time since David died, Maya began to believe that their story wasn't ending. It was beginning a new chapter. "The way this is unfolding has me so emotional. Maya is finally starting to open her heart, but I'm nervous about what's coming next. You know something has to shake this perfect moment, right? What do you think is going to test their growing bond? Let me know in the comments." Maya woke to the sound of voices in the hallway, low, urgent, not quite arguing but definitely tense. She checked the clock, 6:47 a.m. The twins were still sleeping in their room across the hall, but James was clearly awake and talking to someone. She slipped on David's old robe that she'd found hanging in the closet, another thoughtful detail that had made her cry the night before, and crept to her door. Through the crack, she could see James pacing in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, that wasn't part of the agreement," James was saying, his voice strained. David's instructions were very clear about the timeline. Maya's stomach clenched. Agreement? Timeline? What was James not telling her? "I understand the family's concerns, but legally they have no standing here. The estate was purchased and prepared entirely with David's own funds, not family money." James paused, listening. "Yes, I'm aware of the clause. No, I haven't discussed that with her yet." Maya felt the world tilt. "Clause? What clause?" James continued pacing. "Look, I need more time. She's just beginning to accept what David created for her. If you spring this on her now, she'll run. You know she will." The words hit Maya like ice water. They were talking about her like she was a problem to be managed, a variable in some equation she didn't understand. After everything, after David's letters, after the journal, after last night when she'd begun to believe this was all real, there were still secrets. James's voice dropped lower. "I said I need more time. She's not ready for the full terms. Give me until Monday." Full terms. Maya's hands began to shake. What full terms? She heard James end the call and start walking toward the stairs. Maya quickly closed her door, her heart hammering. She needed to think, needed to process what she'd overheard before confronting him. But thinking clearly was impossible when her mind was racing with all the ways this could go wrong. Was the estate not really hers? Were there conditions David hadn't told her about? Was James playing some kind of long game she couldn't see? Maya threw on clothes and made her way downstairs, where she found James in the kitchen making coffee, looking tired and stressed. "Morning," he said, offering her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sleep well." "Who were you talking to?" Maya asked directly. James paused, coffee mug halfway to his lips. "When?" "This morning. In the hallway. You were on the phone talking about agreements and timelines and clauses." Maya crossed her arms. "What aren't you telling me, James?" She watched him consider lying, saw the moment he decided against it, and felt her heart sink. "Maya, sit down. Please." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to tell me what's going on. What clause? What full terms? What happens on Monday?" James set down his coffee and ran his hands through his hair. "There are aspects of David's arrangement that I haven't explained yet. Not because I was trying to deceive you, but because he specifically requested that you have time to accept the basic inheritance before dealing with the more complex parts." Maya felt that familiar rage rising, the same anger that had consumed her when she'd opened the $5 check. "So once again, David made decisions about what I could and couldn't handle. And you went along with it." "Maya." "No." Maya's voice was getting louder. "I specifically asked you yesterday if there were more secrets, and you promised me no more secrets after we got here. You looked me in the eye and promised." "I didn't lie to you," James said carefully. "Everything I told you about the estate is true. You do own it, free and clear. The trust funds for the children are real. The financial security is real." "But..." James was quiet for a long moment. "But David included provisions about what happens if you decide not to keep the estate. Safeguards, he called them." Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. "What kind of safeguards?" "If you choose to sell the property or move away permanently within the first 5 years, the proceeds go into the children's trust funds instead of to you directly. You'd receive enough to live comfortably anywhere you choose, but you wouldn't have access to the full value of what David created." Maya stared at him, trying to process the implications. "So I'm not really free to choose. If I decide this is too much, if I want to go back to Charleston and live a normal life, I'm essentially stealing my children's inheritance." "It's not stealing. It's manipulation." Maya's voice cracked. "Even from the grave, David is controlling my choices. Stay in his dream house and be grateful, or sacrifice my children's future." James stepped toward her. "Maya, that's not how David saw it. He was trying to protect you from making decisions based on fear instead of what's actually best for your family." "And what gives him the right to decide what's best for my family? What gives either of you the right?" Maya felt tears of rage burning her eyes. "I'm their mother. I'm the one who's been raising them alone for 6 months. I'm the one who knows what they need." "You're right," James said quietly. "You are their mother, and you do know what they need. But Maya, David also knew you. He knew you'd find reasons to reject anything that seemed too good to be true." Maya laughed bitterly. "So he made sure I couldn't reject it without hurting my own children. That's not love, James. That's emotional blackmail." The twins' voices carried from upstairs. They were waking up, would be down soon wanting breakfast and wondering why their mother was crying again. "There's more, isn't there?" Maya asked, suddenly certain. "What else haven't you told me?" James looked miserable. The property management company, the financial advisors, Even some of the staff who maintain the grounds, they're all bound by 5-year contracts. If you leave, dozens of people lose their jobs. Maya felt like she was drowning. So not only am I trapped by my children's future, I'm trapped by other people's livelihoods. David really didn't leave me any choice at all, did he? Maya, please. And you. Maya turned on James, all the warmth from the night before curdling into suspicion. You knew all of this yesterday when we were cooking dinner together. You knew when you told me you were starting to care about me. Were those feelings real, or are they part of your job description too? James looked like she'd slapped him. That's not fair. Fair. Maya's voice was rising again. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair, James. It's not fair that my husband died and left me with an inheritance designed to make me feel guilty no matter what I choose. It's not fair that you've been lying to me for 2 days while I started to trust you. And it's not fair that I spent last night thinking maybe I could have a future with someone who was honest about his feelings when you're just another person managing me according to David's instructions. That's not true, James said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, David asked me to help you through this transition. Yes, he hoped we might connect. But Maya, what I feel for you has nothing to do with David's plans. It has to do with watching you read his letters and seeing how much you loved him. It has to do with the way you take care of your children and the way you've survived loss and kept going. It has to do with you. Maya wanted to believe him, but trust felt impossible now. How can I believe anything you say when you've been keeping secrets this whole time? Because I'm telling you the truth now. Because I'm risking David's entire plan by being honest with you before his timeline said you'd be ready. Mama. Amira appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her eyes wide with concern. Why are you yelling? Maya immediately softened her voice, but she couldn't stop the tears. I'm sorry, baby. Mama's just upset about some grown-up things. Aiden joined his sister, both children taking an attention between Maya and James with the careful attention kids develop when their world feels unstable. Are we going home? Aiden asked quietly. The question hit Maya like a physical blow. Home. Where was home now? The tiny apartment in Charleston that felt like a prison? This beautiful estate that came with invisible chains? I don't know, sweetheart, Maya said honestly. Mama needs to figure some things out. She looked at James, who was watching her with an expression of desperate regret. Then she looked around the kitchen where they'd cooked dinner together the night before, where she'd started to imagine a different kind of future. I need some air, Maya said. I need to think. She walked out the back door into the garden, leaving James with the children and all the secrets David had left behind. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the storm completely gone. The mountains rose around the property like protective walls, and Maya could see why David had chosen this place. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was a cage made of love and good intentions. Maya sat on the swing hanging from the oak tree and tried to sort through her emotions. Was she angry at David for trying to control her choices, or was she angry at herself for wanting to run when things got complicated? Was she hurt that James had kept secrets, or was she hurt that she'd let herself care about him when she wasn't ready? The truth was probably all of the above. Behind her, she could hear James's voice through the kitchen window, gentle and patient as he explained to the twins that grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, but that didn't mean anyone was in trouble. Even now, Even when she was furious with him, he was taking care of her children. Maya closed her eyes and tried to imagine David's voice, tried to understand what he'd been thinking when he'd created this elaborate plan. Had he really been trying to control her, or had he been trying to save her from her own self-doubt? And what did it matter now? The damage was done. The trust was broken. And Maya was once again facing an impossible choice with no clear right answer. The swing creaked gently in the mountain breeze, and Maya wondered if love was always this complicated, or if she was just cursed to find the hardest possible way through every major decision in her life. Inside the house, she could hear the twins laughing at something James had said. Despite everything, he was still here, still taking care of them while she fell apart in the garden. That had to mean something. But Maya wasn't sure she was brave enough to figure out what. Oh no. Just when things were getting beautiful, everything falls apart. I'm honestly torn. Do you think David was being controlling or protective? And what about James? Was he wrong to keep those secrets? This is breaking my heart, but I need to know what you're thinking. Please share your thoughts below. Maya sat on the swing for over an hour, watching the mountains and trying to untangle the knot of emotions in her chest. The twins had eventually wandered outside to play, giving her worried glances but sensing she needed space. James had brought her a cup of coffee without saying a word, setting it on the ground beside the tree before retreating back to the house. The coffee had grown cold while Maya wrestled with questions that felt impossible to answer. Was David's plan an act of love or control? Was James's secrecy a betrayal or protection? And underneath it all, the question that terrified her most, what did she actually want? For 6 months, she'd been focused purely on survival, getting through each day, keeping the twins fed and safe, making sure the bills got paid. She'd stopped thinking about dreams or desires or the kind of life she might want if money weren't a constant source of anxiety. Now, suddenly, she had to choose not just what to do with David's gift, but who she wanted to be going forward. Around noon, she heard footsteps on the gravel path. James approached slowly, like someone trying not to spook a wild animal. "The kids are having lunch," he said quietly. "Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Amira told me it was their favorite." Maya didn't respond, but she didn't tell him to go away either. "Maya, I need to tell you something else," James continued, settling onto the ground near the swing. "Something I should have said this morning when you asked about my feelings." Maya finally looked at him. His hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled from a sleepless night and a morning of crisis management. "When Rebecca died," James said, staring at his hands, "I made a promise to myself that I'd never let anyone matter that much again. I built walls so high that I convinced myself they were just practical boundaries." Maya listened, not sure where this was going. "David's plan for you scared me because it forced me to spend time with someone who reminded me what it felt like to care about another person's happiness more than my own comfort." James looked up at her. "And yes, he hoped we might connect. But Maya, what terrified me yesterday wasn't that I was following his instructions, it was that I was starting to ignore them." "What do you mean?" "His timeline said I shouldn't tell you about the 5-year clause until Monday. He thought you needed more time to feel secure here before dealing with the complications. But watching you trust me, watching you start to open your heart." James's voice cracked slightly. "I knew I had to tell you the truth, even if it meant you'd hate me for keeping secrets." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Instead, She saw something that looked like the same confusion and fear she'd been wrestling with all morning. "So you chose honesty over David's plan?" "I chose you over David's plan," James said simply. "I chose what I thought you deserved over what might be easier for everyone else." Maya felt something shift in her chest, a small loosening of the anger that had been choking her all morning. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm about to tell you something that will probably make you even angrier with me," James said. "Something David never wanted you to know." Maya's stomach clenched. "What now?" "The 5-year clause isn't ironclad. There are exceptions built in for extreme circumstances, genuine financial hardship, medical emergencies, situations where staying would cause more harm than leaving." James met her eyes. "If you really want to walk away from all of this, there are legal ways to do it without penalizing the children or the staff." Maya stared at him. David never mentioned exceptions. Because he knew if you had an easy exit, you'd take it the first time things got difficult. He wanted you to have to fight for what you wanted, either fight to leave or fight to stay, because he believed that's the only way you'd make a decision from strength instead of fear. Maya felt fresh tears threatening. So even the trap was an illusion. "It was a test," James said. "David's final way of asking if you believed you deserved the life he wanted to give you." Maya stood up abruptly, pacing away from the swing. "I can't do this, James. I can't spend the rest of my life trying to decode David's psychological puzzles from beyond the grave. I loved him, but this isn't healthy." "You're right," James said, standing too. "It's not healthy. It's not normal. And it's not fair to ask you to live inside someone else's idea of what your life should look like." Maya turned back to him, surprised. "You're agreeing with me?" "Maya, I've spent the last 2 days watching you discover that you're worthy of beautiful things. I've seen you start to believe that your children deserve security and joy. I've watched you begin to imagine a future that's bigger than just surviving." James stepped closer. "If you want to walk away from the estate, I'll help you do it. But don't walk away because you're scared of accepting love. Walk away because it's genuinely not what you want." Maya felt her breath catch. "And what about you? What do you want?" James smiled sadly. "I want you to choose the life that makes you happiest, whether that includes me or not." "That's not an answer." "Okay." James took a deep breath. "I want to wake up in this house with you every morning. I want to help Amira plant tomatoes and teach Aiden to fish in the pond. I want to read David's books and understand why he loved you so completely. I want to prove to you every day that you deserve to be cherished." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "James. But I also want you to choose that because it's what you want, not because David orchestrated it, or because you feel obligated, or because I've somehow manipulated you into thinking it's your only option." Maya looked back toward the house, where she could see her children through the kitchen window, still eating lunch and chatting animatedly about something. They looked settled here, comfortable in a way they hadn't been since David died. "I don't know how to separate what I want from what everyone else thinks I should want," Maya admitted. "Then maybe that's what you need to figure out," James said gently. "Take time. Real time, without pressure from David's timeline or my feelings or anyone else's expectations." Maya turned back to him. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting I go back to Charleston for a week. Give you space to be here with the kids without any outside influence. No lawyers, no timelines, no complicated feelings about someone you've known for 3 days. Maya felt panic rise in her throat. You're leaving. Only if you want me to. Only if you think it would help you figure out what you actually want. Maya realized she was crying again, but these tears felt different. Not angry tears or grief tears, but something rawer and more honest. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of wanting this. Of wanting you. Of believing I deserve something beautiful and then having it taken away again. Maya wiped her cheeks. David dying almost broke me, James. I don't know if I could survive losing someone I love again. James stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Maya, I can't promise I won't die. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that if you choose this, if you choose us, I'll spend every day making sure you know you made the right decision. Maya looked at him, this man who had walked into her life carrying secrets and possibilities in equal measure. She thought about David's letters, about his desperate need to ensure her happiness even after his death. She thought about her children, who deserved to grow up somewhere beautiful and safe. But mostly, she thought about the woman she'd been before grief and fear had made her smaller. The woman who'd been brave enough to fall in love with David despite their differences. The woman who'd moved across the country for him, who'd believed in their future even when his family didn't approve. That woman would have chosen love. That woman would have chosen hope. I need to ask you something, Maya said. And I need you to be completely honest. Anything. If David had never asked you to help me, if we just met randomly somewhere, would you still want this? Would you still want me? James cupped her face gently with both hands. Maya, I fell in love with you reading David's letters about you before I ever met you. I fell in love with your strength and your devotion to your children and your capacity to love someone so completely that it changed both of your lives. He paused, searching her eyes. But I fell in love with the real you sitting in that study yesterday, reading your husband's journal and crying over how much he cherished you. I fell in love with the way you help your children feel safe, the way you ask hard questions, the way you're brave enough to consider accepting something extraordinary even when it scares you. Maya felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like coming home. I want to stay, she said quietly. Not because David wanted me to, not because it's practical, not because I don't have other choices. I want to stay because this place feels like love made tangible. And I want to teach my children that they deserve to live in spaces built from love. James smiled, and this time it reached his eyes completely. And what about us? What do you want there? Maya stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly, tasting possibility and hope and the promise of mornings that held joy instead of just survival. I want to find out, she whispered against his lips. I want to choose love again, even though it's terrifying. Behind them, the twins burst out of the house, running toward them with the boundless energy of children who sensed something important had shifted in their world. Mama. Amira called out. Are we staying? Are we really going to live here? Maya looked at her children, at James, at the beautiful house David had built for them, and at the mountains that would watch over whatever came next. Yes, baby, she said, her voice strong and certain for the first time in months. We're staying. We're home. I'm literally sobbing happy tears right now. Maya choosing love over fear, James choosing honesty over obligation. This is what my heart needed. But there's still one more act left, and I'm so curious to see how this beautiful story wraps up. What do you think will happen in the resolution? Drop your thoughts below. 6 months later, Maya woke to the sound of rain on the windows. But this time, instead of feeling trapped, she felt cocooned in safety. The master bedroom had become truly hers now, filled with her books, her photographs, her collection of coffee mugs that James had started buying her from every business trip. She rolled over to find his side of the bed empty but still warm, and smiled when she heard voices from downstairs. James helping the twins get ready for school, their chatter punctuated by the sound of breakfast being prepared. Maya had never imagined that ordinary moments could feel so extraordinary. She pulled on her robe and padded downstairs to find organized chaos in the kitchen. Amira was at the island carefully packing her lunch, tongue poking out in concentration as she arranged her sandwich just so. Aiden was wearing his school clothes, but had somehow already managed to get syrup in his hair. "Morning, beautiful," James said, appearing at her elbow with a perfectly prepared cup of coffee. Cream, no sugar, exactly how she liked it. "Morning," Maya replied, accepting the coffee and the brief kiss he pressed to her temple. 6 months in, and these small intimacies still made her heart flutter. "Mama, look." Amira held up her lunchbox. "I packed everything myself." "Very impressive, sweetheart." Maya examined the contents. "Did you remember to pack a drink?" "James reminded me," Amira said proudly. "He knows all the lunch rules now." Maya met James's eyes over her daughter's head. He'd learned the lunch rules and the bedtime routines, and which twin needed extra encouragement on math homework, and which one required firm boundaries about screen time. He'd become part of their family gradually, naturally, without trying to replace David, but instead adding his own brand of steady care to their daily lives. "Aiden, buddy, what happened to your hair?" James asked, reaching for a damp paper towel. "Pancakes are sticky," Aiden explained solemnly, submitting to having his head cleaned with the patience of a child who'd grown used to being taken care of by multiple adults. Maya watched James gently work syrup out of her son's curls and felt that familiar swell of gratitude that had become her morning meditation. Not gratitude born from desperation, but the deep satisfaction of someone whose life had grown large enough to hold abundance. "I'll drive them to school," James offered, the same offer he made every morning. "Actually," Maya said, "I'd like to drive them today. I want to stop by the old apartment complex afterward." James raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "More than okay." Maya smiled. "Mrs. Rodriguez called yesterday. Her daughter is getting divorced and needs a place to stay with her kids temporarily. I thought maybe our old apartment might work, if Mr. Peterson is willing to rent to someone with my recommendation." Maya had maintained the lease on their Charleston apartment for 3 months after moving to the estate, partly out of caution and partly because she hadn't been ready to completely sever ties with their old life. When she'd finally decided to let it go, she'd felt only relief. "That's a beautiful idea," James said softly. "Can we come with you?" Amira asked. "I want to see our old house." Maya considered this. The twins had asked about their Charleston apartment a few times over the past months, usually when something reminded them of their life before the estate. Maya had worried that visiting might make them sad or confused, but they seemed curious rather than homesick. "If you want to," Maya said, "but you might miss the school field trip to the nature preserve." We can see the nature preserve any time, Aiden said pragmatically. We live in one. An hour later, Maya was driving through Charleston with the twins chattering in the back seat, pointing out familiar landmarks and marveling at how small everything looked compared to their mountain home. The apartment complex seemed shabbier than Maya remembered, but not in a way that made her sad. Instead, she felt proud of the life she'd built there, the way she'd made a tiny space feel like home through sheer determination and love. Mrs. Rodriguez met them in the parking lot, her face lighting up when she saw the twins. "Mira que grandes están," she exclaimed, pulling both children into enthusiastic hugs. "Look how big you are." "We live in a mansion now," Amira announced proudly, "with a secret passage and a pond with fish." "And James lives with us," Aiden added. "He's going to teach me to build a treehouse." Mrs. Rodriguez looked questioningly at Maya, who found herself blushing slightly. "It's a long story," Maya said, "but we're very happy." "Bueno," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "You deserve happiness, mija. David, que en paz descanse, he would want you to be happy." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with mentions of David, but it was gentler now, less like a wound and more like a tender scar that reminded her of something precious. They toured the empty apartment, and Maya was surprised by how small it seemed. Had they really lived in this tiny space for years? The twins ran from room to room, their voices echoing off bare walls as they pointed out where their beds had been, where Maya's desk had sat, where they'd built blanket forts on rainy days. "It was a good house," Amira declared. "But our new house is better." "This house was perfect for us when we needed it," Maya corrected gently. "And now it will be perfect for someone else who needs it." Later, Mrs. Rodriguez introduced Maya to her daughter Carmen, a tired-looking woman about Maya's age with two young children clinging to her legs. Maya saw herself 6 months ago in Carmen's careful posture, in the way she held herself like someone braced for disappointment. "The rent is very reasonable," Maya told Carmen, "and Mrs. Rodriguez is the best neighbor you could ask for. She helped me so much when my children were small." Carmen nodded, tears threatening. "I can't afford much right now, but I can pay first month's rent, and I'm looking for work." "Actually," Maya said, an idea forming, "are you good with children?" Carmen brightened slightly. "Yes, I love kids. I worked at a daycare before." Maya exchanged glances with Mrs. Rodriguez. "I might know of a position. It's not in Charleston, but it comes with housing. Let me make some calls." On the drive back to the mountains, Maya's mind was spinning with possibilities. The estate had a beautiful carriage house that David had renovated, but they'd never used. Carmen could live there in exchange for helping with childcare and some of the property maintenance. It would solve Carmen's housing problem and give Maya the flexibility to pursue some of the dreams she'd been nurturing. "Mama," Aiden said from the back seat, "are you going to help that lady like Daddy helped us?" Maya met her son's eyes in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Daddy made sure we had a good place to live. Now you're making sure she has a good place to live." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "I think you're right, baby. I think that's exactly what I'm doing." That evening, after the twins were in bed and James was grading papers in the study, Maya found herself in the garden where she'd sat on the swing 6 months ago, trying to decide whether to trust the gift David had left her. The swing still hung from the oak tree, but everything else had changed. She and James had planted flower beds along the paths. The twins had helped install a bird feeder that attracted cardinals and blue jays. The pond had been stocked with fish that Aiden named, and Amira insisted on feeding precisely measured amounts of food. James found her there, settling beside her on the swing with 2 mugs of tea. "How did the apartment visit go?" he asked. "Good. Productive." Maya leaned into his warmth. "I think I want to start a foundation." James nearly spilled his tea. "What kind of foundation?" "For families going through loss. Practical help, housing assistance, childcare, financial counseling. Things that help people rebuild after their world falls apart." Maya looked up at the stars beginning to appear between the tree branches. "David gave me so much more than I could ever use. It feels right to share it." "Maya, that's incredible. But are you sure you're ready for something that big?" Maya considered this. 6 months ago, the idea of managing a foundation would have terrified her. But 6 months ago, she'd been a different person, smaller, more afraid, convinced she didn't deserve extraordinary things. "I'm ready," she said. "I want Amira and Aiden to grow up seeing that when you receive abundance, you share it. I want them to understand that love multiplies when you give it away." James kissed the top of her head. "David would be so proud of who you've become." "I think," Maya said carefully, "that I'm becoming who I always was underneath. I just needed someone to believe in me enough to give me space to grow." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountain, owls calling, wind through the trees, the distant sound of the twins' white noise machine carrying through their open bedroom window. "James," Maya said eventually, "there's something I want to ask you." "Anything." Maya turned to face him fully. "Will you marry me?" James's eyes widened. "Maya, I know it might seem fast, but we've been through so much together already. You've seen me at my worst and chosen to stay. You've loved my children like they were your own. You've helped me become brave enough to build something beautiful instead of just surviving." Maya took his hands in hers. "I love you, James. Not because David hoped I would. Not because it's convenient, but because you've shown me what it looks like when someone chooses you every single day." James was quiet for so long that Maya started to worry she'd misread everything, that the life they'd been building was more fragile than she'd thought. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. "Maya Johnson," he said, "I thought you'd never ask." They were married 3 months later in the garden, surrounded by the twins, Mrs. Rodriguez and Carmen, Ellen Carmichael from the property management company, and a small group of friends who'd watched their love story unfold. Maya wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers picked from their own meadow. During the ceremony, Amira and Aiden served as joint ring bearers, taking their responsibilities seriously as they carefully delivered the bands that would make James officially part of their family. "Do you, Maya, take James to be your husband?" the minister asked, "to love and cherish, in abundance and in want, in joy and in sorrow?" Maya looked at James, at her children beaming beside them, at the beautiful estate that had taught her she was worthy of extraordinary love. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I absolutely do." And when James slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya felt the final piece of her new life click into place. Not because the fairy tale was complete, but because she'd learned that the best fairy tales aren't about magic. They're about love that's brave enough to choose hope again and again, even when hope feels impossible. Later that night, After the guests had gone home and the twins were asleep, Maya and James sat on their swing under a canopy of stars. Maya was still wearing her wedding dress, but her shoes were off and her feet were bare in the grass. "Any regrets?" James asked, twirling her ring around her finger. Maya thought about David, about the $5 check that had started this whole journey, about the leap of faith that had brought her to this moment. "Only one," she said. James looked concerned. "What's that?" "I wish David could see this. I wish he could know that his plan worked, that I learned to believe I deserve beautiful things, that his children are growing up knowing they're cherished, that love really can create miracles." James smiled. "Maya, look around. Look at this place he built for you, at the life you've created here, at the foundation you're planning to help other families. Look at your children sleeping peacefully in the house their father designed for them." James gestured toward the mountains that surrounded them, protective and eternal. "David can see this. It's written in every beam of this house, every flower in this garden, every choice you've made to build something beautiful instead of just surviving." Maya leaned back against her husband's chest and looked up at the stars that had watched over this land long before David found it, long before he dreamed of bringing her here. "I love you," she whispered to the night sky, and she wasn't entirely sure whether she was talking to James or to David or to the universe that had somehow conspired to give her more happiness than she'd ever thought possible. But it didn't matter, because love was love, and it multiplied when you gave it away. And Maya Johnson Mitchell finally understood that she had enough love to give to last a lifetime. Oh my goodness, I'm absolutely sobbing happy tears. This story has taken me on such an emotional journey, from heartbreak to hope to pure joy. Thank you so much for joining me on this story from heartbreak to hope. Stories like this remind us that even in our darkest moments, love has a way of finding us and showing us we're worthy of beautiful things.